Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Remember, which is episode 6 of season 3 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review every episode of Star Trek, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 3rd season Voyager episode, Remember. So Remember is the episode in which Voyager is hosting a group of telepathic aliens as they transport them back to their home world. And these aliens have the ability to transmit memories and experiences to other people. However, they only do so with consent. However, Taurus starts having these very erotic dreams every night, and these dreams begin to tell a narrative about a woman from this alien culture who was in love with this young man, but this young man was a part of the group referred to as regressives, and this group was being forcibly removed from their planet to another colony world. And the young woman in which B'Elanna is playing out her memories has her father was very much against her dating this young man. And B'Elanna begins to learn that it is one of the visiting aliens that are giving her these memories, and so they try to figure out who it is, but the aliens deny it, saying that they would never do so without permission. And then as the dreams continue, B'Elanna discovers that these regressives were in fact forcibly, not only forcibly removed from the planet, but they were exterminated. They were killed in a genocide. However, the popular narrative of the planet was that they were put on another colony and that they killed themselves off with disease because they were not as clean as they were. And so the young man, B'Elanna, the character that B'Elanna is playing, Karina, turned on him eventually because her father convinced her that he was cheating on her, and then he was executed and she cheered as it happened. And so B'Elanna figures out who it is that is giving her these memories. It was an elder woman and on the contingent of visitors, and she is giving them to B'Elanna because she knows that because she's an outsider that she won't reject these memories and that she'll accept them. And she wants B'Elanna to tell everyone what really happened. And this woman then dies, who B'Elanna knows was killed by the other aliens who figured out that she was giving B'Elanna these memories. But of course they deny it, and Voyager has no proof that they're guilty of this. So B'Elanna tries to convince one of the young women in the contingent of what she said is the truth. She, of course, is very not receptive of this and rejecting this because it's not what she's been taught. But then B'Elanna gives her permission to experience the memories that she was given to maybe convince her mind and to get her to ask questions and challenge the popular narrative. So, I love this episode. I'm just gonna not beat around the bush here. This is one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. I think it's a very powerful episode that deals with the important issue of genocide, but not only genocide, is that it's about the topic of propaganda and of narratives that are meant to deceive the population and to hide one's crime. Now, the topic of propaganda is a particularly interesting one to me, or one that I'm interested in, one that I studied, one that I think is very important. So whenever there's an episode that makes good commentary on it, I am a lot more attracted to it and a lot more interested to it. The other Voyager episode I'm thinking of that does this is the episode Nemesis in season 4, which is another really great episode that's underrated. But I think this episode is even better because it's a lot more emotional and personal, and it does that really great job of sort of sucking you into the personal Romeo and Juliet-esque storyline, but then uses that once the viewer is drawn into this personal story, uses that to expand upon this greater atrocities, this genocide that was committed by these people who were denying that they were doing it when they were doing it, and still in history books rewrote history so that, oh, these people just killed themselves. And that's just the way they do it is just so powerful. And there's amazing performances with Roxanne Dawson. I think she gives one of the best performances she does in the entire show. I'm not sure, like, I call this the best B'Elanna episode, but I don't know. It's the best episode with B'Elanna in it that features B'Elanna, although it doesn't really explore her character, because she, even though she's the one who experiences these memories and who fights for the memories, it's not really her story, it's Corinna's story, and she's just reliving it. So in that case, it's not really an episode about B'Elanna. So I think the best episode about B'Elanna is probably Prototype in season 2, which I already covered. But the best episode that features B'Elanna is this one, because this is a better episode than Prototype. It just doesn't get into her character the same way that that episode does. But it also features one of the best guest actors of the franchise, Bruce Davison, playing Corinna's father, and my God, does he come off as so insidious and so despicable, which is exactly how this character should come off, and he pulls that off perfectly. In fact, I did a video a while ago with my top 10 favorite guest stars in Star Trek, and I was thinking that I forgot to put him on there. I was like, holy shit, did I forget to put Bruce Davison on there? So I went and rewatched it, and I didn't forget, in fact, to put him on there. He was my number 5, which sounds about right to me, because ahead of him was, as number 4 was James Sloyan, number 3 was Kurtwood Smith, number 2 was David Warner, and number 1 was Harris Yulin. And so that sounds right to me. That sounds like the great top 5. And if anything, I might put him higher than James Sloyan, but it's hard to say because they're both so damn good. And James Sloyan gave multiple great performances, to be fair, as multiple characters in Star Trek, whereas Bruce Davison, this was his only episode, so maybe that gave James Sloyan a slight edge. But these are definitely the top 5 guest actors in the franchise, in my humble opinion. And I think he's definitely right up there, and he gives an amazing performance in this episode. So let's talk about the writing of this episode, because, and this is something I didn't learn until maybe a decade ago. So for the first decade and a half or whatever after I saw this episode, I was not aware of this, and I already loved this episode. And that is that this was originally written as a Next Generation script. And I tried to get more information on that, but I couldn't find, it's hard, I couldn't find any. What I really wanted was to see the original script for Next Generation, because it was, Deanna Troi was supposed to be the main character. But there tends to be conflicting information that there ever was a script. That seems that maybe it was just a story idea. But to me, it seemed like it was like a really fully developed story idea. So maybe, I'm guessing here because, again, I can't find the proper information. Maybe it was a story idea that Brennan Braga and Joe Menosky came up with, and they took it to the writing staff, hammered it out, as they do in those group meetings. But they decided not to do it as an episode before it ever went to script, before they ever said, they hammered out the story and broke down the story, but then never actually wrote it as a script. That's just my guess. And then in Voyager, they brought it back and they gave it to Lisa Klink to write the teleplay for. So Joe Manowski and Brennan Braga are credited as story by, because they came up with the story in TNG and then handed it to Lisa Klink in Voyager. And I wonder if this was Jerry Taylor's idea, because Ron Braga was on staff of Voyager at this time, so he could have developed his own story idea. I think Joe Manowski, I don't know if he was a staff member, but he was around, like he would work on Voyager scripts, occasionally. So they could have rewrote it, but instead they gave it to Lisa Klink to rewrite it, which I wonder what the thought process there was. But whatever it was, I think that was a great idea. I think that it was really good to get fresh eyes to actually look at the script and take it in a different direction, especially since she was converting it from a TNG idea to a Voyager script. And it's funny because there's two different opinions that I read online from the two original writers of the story idea. Brennan Braga said he didn't like it, or didn't think it worked as well as it would have as a TNG episode, because he felt like that movies like Schindler's List and other Holocaust stories that came out between the time the episode was conceived and to the time this episode came out kind of diminished it, and that it just came off as just doing yet another Holocaust story that's been done recently a lot. But then the other opinion is Joe Manowski, who thinks that it works much better as a Voyager episode, that having B'Elanna be the through character, someone who is not like sensitive the way Deanna Troi was, someone who's a bit more sort of prone to anger and hostile, having her be the through eyes that sees this story was actually a lot more powerful than had it been Deanna Troi. And I have to say, I agree with Joe Manowski. I take Joe Manowski's side on this. Sorry, Brennan. But I agree with him that this does seem like it would be better as a Voyager episode. Now, it's hard for me to truly judge that because I did not read this original story idea from TNG. I wasn't there in the writer's room, so I don't know exactly what they came up with, or exactly how it would have played out as a TNG episode. I was hoping there would be a script for this online, but again, there's not. So, but just judging by the finished product here and trying to imagine how it would have played out as a TNG episode, I can't help but think that Joe Manowski is 100% correct in this case, that this worked much better as a Voyager episode and much better as a B'Elanna episode than it would have as a Deanna Troi episode. But here's the thing, when I first learned that this was originally a TNG script, that actually made so much sense, because as I said, I didn't even know this until like 15 years or so after I saw the episode. But when I first saw it, I instantly thought, like, this feels more like a TNG episode. Well, specifically, the part of the visiting aliens. And specifically, it reminds me a lot of the TNG episode, Violations. Because that featured a visiting group of aliens, telepaths, who they had like a nice gathering and they would show off their telepathic skills, which is exactly what they did in Voyager. It was like the same thing. Even the same actress, apparently, who played the older Julian in Violations, plays Corinna Jarrell, or whatever, Corinna, I can't remember, whatever her name is, the old lady who has the memories. It was played by the same actress. And I didn't even know that. And of course, the main story ideas are totally different. Where Violations was about, this guy who's going around telepathically raping members of the crew. And this is about someone implanting their memories, or sharing their memories of a genocide that took place on their planet. So two totally different story ideas, however the same setup at the start of the episode, where there's visiting telepathic aliens, we're hanging out in the it's 10 Forward and TNG. It was the mess hall in Voyager, but this, that's their version of 10 Forward. They're hanging out and enjoying these aliens and having them show off their telepathic skills. It's the exact same setup. So, and I just thought the whole idea of having visiting aliens that they're hanging out and doing diplomatic shit on, that's more of a TNG thing. That's something that TNG did a lot, particularly in season 5. And Voyager never really does it that much. I mean, I guess there was a little bit of that in a sense, but that wasn't the same thing as hanging out, transporting these aliens and hanging out in the mess hall. That seemed more of a TNG thing. So that part of it is what felt like a TNG episode. The rest, the main storyline about the genocide, did not feel like a TNG episode. But apparently it was. I'm not saying that I couldn't imagine this being in TNG. I could, but it's not typical of TNG, whereas the setup with the visiting aliens with their telepathic powers, that is typical of TNG, in my opinion. But I wanted to know when in TNG the story idea came up with, because Brennan Braga apparently in the court said, me and Joe Manowski came up with the story idea a long time ago. Define a long time ago. I had originally thought that they wrote this during season 7 of TNG, because I thought that I heard that they rejected this script idea because it was too close to Schindler's List, but that doesn't actually make sense, because Schindler's List came out and I think after season 7 finished, during season 7, I think, and this didn't really feel like a season 7. Plus, Joe Manowski wasn't really he's still around for season 7. He did stuff like Masks, but he wasn't a staff writer at the time. So I think the Schindler's List quote, when I went back and read it, wasn't about that. It was about Brennan Braga thinking that, remember, after the Voyager version came out, that it was weakened by Schindler's List coming out. So I don't think it actually had anything to do with why the original story idea was rejected. So it could have been written during season 5. As I said, Joe Manowski was on staff then, or season 4. For that matter, could have been Brennan Braga saying a long time ago. What constitutes a long time ago? But season 3 was before Brennan Braga and Joe Manowski came on. So I think it's either season 4 or 5. It feels more like a season 4 or 5 episode than it does a 6 or 7. But I don't know. I could be wrong. But I just wish there was more information about this original idea. But ultimately, I think it does work better as a B'Elanna episode, as a Voyager episode, and I think it does really work in that regard. I feel like there's some people, I've read some reviews of them being you can tell this is supposed to be a TNG episode and it doesn't work as one, which I totally disagree with. It's only that setup that felt TNG to me, and also the main thrust of the story with B'Elanna. I can't see that working any better with Troi. I just can't. I think Troi would have ruined it. As much as I like Troi as a character, I think her style of empathy or relating to people, I just don't think it would have worked. I think B'Elanna's style of being a bit more sort of hostile or whatever, I think it just sells this so much better, and how B'Elanna is sort of really engulfed and encapsulated by these dreams. Now, this leads me to the original promo for this episode. This is something I've been talking a bit about in Voyager, and I think season 3 is I remember the promos from that the most, because the original UPN promos that originally came out when the episodes first aired were ridiculous and sensationalized. It's like UPN was just trying really hard to appeal, make it seem sexy and action-packed to get people to watch. And the promo for this episode, well, here, let me just, again, saw these online. They're now online. So let me just show you the original promo to this episode.
Voyager's taking chances, breaking rules, and shaking up Wednesday nights forever.
Red alert!
But the dream season has only just begun.
I've been having these dreams. They're very intense.
Because on the next Voyager, B'Elanna's about to live out her deepest, darkest fantasies.
They are the most sensual dreams I've ever had in my life.
And you won't believe the climax.
B'Elanna, can you hear me? Medical emergency.
Star Trek Voyager, back to back with the Sentinel, all new UPN Wednesday.
You see how it kind of, B'Elanna's having sexy dreams. And that's like, doesn't at all like represent what the episode's actually about. Now they do show some of the more like horrific stuff with the guy being killed and tortured or whatever, but they're only like snippets, and they still present it, again, as I said, like in a totally sensationalized way. Like, ooh, look, this is very sensual and sexual. Where it's actually an episode about the Holocaust analogy. So, really a gross misrepresentation about what the episode is actually about. Which a lot of these UPN promos are. But to me, this always stuck out to me as one of the worst examples of that, of just of being a total misrepresentation of what the episode's actually about. But anyway, there, like the start of the episode with B'Elanna and Chakotay, where she's telling Chakotay about the dreams, and I think some people were saying that, they kind of hinting at a B'Elanna Chakotay thing, like they were in the episode Persistence of Vision, where B'Elanna had this vision of Chakotay, but I think they dropped that after that episode, and I think this episode doesn't. I think they're just implying that they're close friends, because they were in the Maquis together, and that B'Elanna, if she would share like something so personal and intimate with somebody, it would be Chakotay. And that's all I took from it. I don't see any sort of romantic suggestion. And people were saying that Chakotay was having like flirty banter with her, which I disagree. I think he was just trying to be a good friend. And I think it makes sense for the storyline. Now there's also Harry Kim has a flirty thing going on with this woman, and this is before they smashed Tom and B'Elanna together, but it's not that far before. But in any case, it would have just made more sense to me if Tom was the one flirting with her. I mean, not that I mind that they actually give Harry Kim, more, but I was thinking while I was watching this episode that he, I guess he took Tom's advice from season 1 and let her go. Because before he was like all like, no, Libby, I have a girlfriend, Libby, I can't betray her. But now he's like, screw that. Let's go flirt with other random alien women. I don't know. I guess. I don't know. I just think it should have been Tom, personally. So let's get to the political commentary, and I'm going to be talking about modern day political situations, so if that thing doesn't appeal to you, you can skip ahead, but I'm not going to shy away from getting into what this episode's actually about, and what it's about is genocide. Now, starting with this as a Holocaust analogy. This is where I disagreed with Brennan Briga, because he said, oh, it was too much of a Holocaust analogy, and it was Schindler's List and other stuff already covered this recently, and it was just felt like a rehash of that. Totally disagree. Yes, the Holocaust analogy was definitely there, but to me the main difference is that this would be the case if the Holocaust denial was mainstream, where the mainstream in history books were acting like this Holocaust never occurred. That would be more along the lines of this episode. Now, I do realize that when the Holocaust was occurring, that the general population, especially in Germany, was not aware that it was occurring, and that the mainstream line was that there was no death camps or concentration camps, and that all the atrocities that occurred were not occurring. So if you talk to, someone in Germany during the 40s and told them that the Holocaust was occurring, they would call you a liar. They would say you're full of shit, because the propaganda was misleading them, just like the propaganda was misleading in this episode. But the difference is that propaganda held, and that remains the official story throughout history. So I would compare this more with the Native American genocide, because that's something that I feel like was not really uncovered as a genocide until the last 100 years. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not a history scholar or anything. Maybe people were aware of it before, but it feels like the mainstream narrative of this, to this day, there's still people who deny that there was a genocide. Like, the whole don't get me into all these revisionist historians that exist now, but they're the same ones that try to pretend like the Civil War wasn't about slavery, even though it's right there in the Declaration of Independence for the Confederacy that it was all about slavery. But anyway, sorry, it's somewhat related. I'm not really getting off topic, because that is related. Like, slavery is another dark thing in history that was, not portrayed as dark as it was when it was occurring. But I think with this episode, the thing it reminds me the most, though, and because I don't know, I'm a little bit like retrospective, because this episode came out in the mid-90s, and the thing I was going to talk about was Christopher Columbus, and how he was taught in the history books as being this historical hero who discovered the Americas, this visionary explorer. And it wasn't until fairly recently, like within the last 10 or 15 years, that I learned the true historical context, that he was actually a craven, genocidal maniac who oversaw the enslavement, mass rape, and torture, and most gruesome killing and slaying of indigenous people. And I remember watching and reading something about him recently, that the original, this idea of him being this historic, heroic, explorer was something that was kind of made up in the 1800s of or 19th century in the United States, to try to paint like more white American heroes, that even at the time that Columbus existed, that the main Spanish royalty and government knew that he was like this crazy like maniac who I don't know, you can check out more historian things for more accuracy. Again, as I said, I'm not a historian, but I can't help but think of that as it relates to this episode, because that, and which is why it strikes me more relevant than the Holocaust, because as I said, it would be as if Holocaust denial was still mainstream, and it's not. It still exists, unfortunately, but it's not mainstream. But the denial of the genocide committed by Christopher Columbus and his ilk was mainstream. That's not what I was taught as a kid, and it's not until fairly recently that the record has been corrected, and there's still many people who fight against this because they were brought up, to believe that Christopher Columbus was a heroic explorer. And so when people try to tell them now, oh no, that's wrong, he was actually, this genocidal maniac guilty of like the most heinous atrocities, they're in denial and they refuse to believe it, because that's not what they were taught. That's not how they were brought up to believe in. And so that, I think, is way more relevant to this episode. And it's like the whole, Columbus Day thing, how they're trying to change it now to Indigenous Peoples Day, and there's still some states in the U.S. that refuse to do so. That's still call it Columbus Day. And as I said, like this, most of this came about like the common realization that he wasn't the man that history was painting him to be. Most of this came out after this episode was made, so I'm not saying that was the intention of this episode. But it's certainly, looking at it now in retrospect, it's more sort of accurate analogy. In my opinion, it fits this episode a lot more. But you could also look at it in the way that this was, comparing it to the Holocaust, that there were, as I said, at the time, people were in denial that was happening. I don't think just in Germany, I think throughout the world. I don't think it was commonly known, the genocide that was taking place, until after the end of World War II. Again, historians can correct me if I'm wrong. And as I said, even to this day, there are still people who deny the Holocaust existed. And that's how prevalent this... And again, they're more of like a minor fringe. But the fact that they exist as large numbers as they do, even though they are a fringe, is still a problem. It's still an issue, and one that this episode does highlight. However, in this episode, like, it's everyone who denies it, like the official historical record. And that's why I love the contrast between, you find out the person who's giving B'Elanna these memories is an older woman, an elderly woman, and that so this genocide took place so long ago that the younger generation was brought up to believe that, these people were, regressives, they killed themselves, they were irresponsible because they refused to use, the be hygienic, and they killed off disease. And this is another interesting thing about this episode, is that they portray a race of germaphobes, which actually it makes a lot of sense. Like, Neelix kindly describes it as, they're very hygienic, and you think that's just like a throwaway line, but that actually ends up being a very important plot point, because it shows that these regressives, who are kind of, I suppose, a modern analogy would be Amish people, or people who reject modern day technology, and how the mainstream society, since they're so germophobic, they see this rejecting of, hygienic technology as disgusting and dangerous. In fact, you notice the thing that Bruce Davison and the other characters keep hammering when they put down the regressives is that, they spread disease. That's their main thing, is because they're germophobic, and because they refuse to use this hygienic technology, they have a natural fear and hatred of them. And the whole thing about, it makes this character so fucking despicable, how he blatantly lies about, they just want to live up in this other colony, so we're just allowing them to live the way that they want to live away from us. But at the same time, he puts them down. It's like they're regressive, they're repulsive, they'll destroy us. So it kind of betrays his true intentions. And also to mention the fact that it's ethnic cleansing, even if they weren't killing off all of them, which we find out they are, even if they were just forcibly removing them, that's ethnic cleansing. They're cleansing this group, who I believe are described as a different ethnicity, not just a different philosophy. But that's only implied. They never state that outright. I thought it would have been more accurate to history if they mentioned religion, because that definitely factors into real life history a lot, and where ethnic cleansing and other sort of genocides, usually they do it because, your religion's different than mine. Not always, I suppose, but it often plays a factor. But yeah, so they were ethnically cleansing this group of people, but really they were exterminating them, committing mass genocide. It's more, I guess you would call it a Holocaust, that they were trying to kill off everyone. And there is a difference, and this is what some people don't realize, what the term genocide means. The term genocide doesn't mean to actively try to kill off everyone of a certain group. It means to try to destroy in whole or in part a specific group of people. And so that leads me to the more modern day analogy, which did exist in the 90s, but has changed and evolved since the 90s, but it's been there for a while, is of course the Israel and Palestine conflict, which I know is a main sort of volatile topic, but I don't want to be a coward and shy away from the fact that what's going on currently is a fucking genocide, because that's exactly what it is. And the more I learn about it, the more I find just how despicable it is. And I see a lot of similarities with this episode, particularly how the people in this episode try to justify their actions. And they try to hide what they're actually doing and sort of paint themselves as the victims. Like, these people in this episode are like, they're trying to kill us all with their disease. They're backwards and they're primitive and they refuse to accept our help, and they're trying to kill us all with diseases, so we need to get rid of them in order to protect ourselves. And when those group of regressors tried to fight back or tried to run away, they were violent criminals and we need to execute them immediately, even though they're the ones who were being exterminated. And so I can't help but draw parallels to what's going on in Palestine and how Israel had enacted apartheid, and whenever people violently fought back against that, even if they weren't justified, even if they themselves committed atrocities, which they did, they just used that as an excuse to further commit genocide. and in this case ethnic cleansing, which is what the people in the episode are doing. And I think it's beyond obvious to anyone who is actually educated in this area and honest with themselves and not biased that the whole war on Hamas that started 2 years ago, as I record this, it was framed as we need to go in and wipe out this terrorist organization who committed this atrocious atrocity against us. But really, responding to the atrocity was just an excuse to commit the ethnic cleansing that they always wanted to commit. They just were given the proper excuse that, oh, we're just trying to defend ourselves now, which anyone who actually studies exactly what's going on knows that it goes far beyond defending themselves. That just to name a few atrocities, children getting shot in the head by snipers, and the most journalists have died in this conflict than any other conflict in the past 100 years combined. They purposely wouldn't execute any journalists because they don't want the world to know what they're actually doing. And the fact that people can still defend this and act like, and again, much like the people of this episode act like, oh, what are you talking about? This isn't a genocide. We're just defending ourselves. They're the ones who are actually the violent genocides. We're just trying to defend ourselves. It's can't help but see the striking similarities in this episode to, we're just trying to defend ourselves against these people who are spreading disease and shit. We're just trying to help them. We're not trying to hurt them. We want them to live and prosper in this other colony. But it's just an excuse to ethnically cleanse them. In this case, again, the slight difference is that, and this is what people argue with, if Israel wanted to wipe out Palestine and kill everyone, they could have done that. I'm like, yes, but they couldn't have done that and maintain the facade that they were just defending themselves. And their ultimate goal isn't necessarily to exterminate all Palestinians. It's to ethnically cleanse them. That is, to get them out of the area that they call Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, and so that they can colonize it and take it over. And if they get them out, either force evacuation or destroying their homes so that they no longer can live there, which I believe they've really already accomplished. And at this stage, it seems like the only way that they can survive is to move, which was Israel's goal the whole time, of course. So I guess you could say there's a slight difference there, because in this case, in this episode, it's actually much worse, because the cover story was ethnic cleansing, but in actuality they were exterminating them. But that, again, that could apply through many different examples throughout history. And this is why, when I bring up these things that occurred mostly, after this episode was made, this is why, because when you do an episode like this, it's so universal, and unfortunately, history constantly repeats itself. And that's, you get this with a lot of Star Trek episodes, some TNG episodes and some DS9 episodes that I compare to 9/11 and stuff like that, even though it was made way before 9/11 happened, because of those universal themes that just keep repeating itself throughout history. And yeah, that's part of the reason why I think this episode's so powerful, and why it really stands the test of time. As I said, it draws the viewer in with this personal story, but then it expands to something much more important. It makes an analogy on something that people need to be aware of throughout history. And that's the propaganda. The more so than, I mean, not saying that the propaganda is more important than the genocide itself, but it goes hand in hand, because people can't be outraged by a genocide if they are not aware that it's occurring, which is a lot of the whole point of especially what's going on currently with the protesters who try to make people aware of the atrocities committed in genocide. They're labeled as anti-Semitic. That is the easy go-to to try to hide the atrocities they're committed. They just label anyone who tries to fight against them as anti-Semitic, which is disgusting, and in my opinion is actually more anti-Semitic than the people they're accusing of being anti-Semitic, because the people they're accusing of being anti-Semitic actually want the best for Israeli civilians as well. They don't want to see them suffer. They don't want to see Palestinians suffer. They don't want to see anyone suffer. They're just against genocide in general. But because that is against their plans of ethnic cleansing, they have to smear them by calling them anti-Semitic, which is fucking disgusting. But anyway, sorry, I told you I was going to go off into modern day politics. Anyway, I would now like to thank those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. This helped me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Jordan Johnson and Brandon Neal Howells. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Alessandro Migalacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Remember, more like P-member. Isn't this the one where a tourist leads another life of a dead person or something? I'm pretty sure that's what this is. If it is, then this is the one of the better tourist episodes. She didn't get a lot of great ones. I like Faces from season 1, and I know Mark does too, because he knows what's good. But this is another example of tourist episode that I remember liking. It's kind of ironic that I'm not sure whether or not this episode I'm thinking of, considering the episode is titled Remember. More like Forget. Wait, should that have been my joke? Or do you think P-member was better?" I think maybe Forget's better, actually. P-member, I'm not a huge fan of that one. What does that even mean, P-member? You pee from your member? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I think Forget is probably better. But it would be better if this was a forgettable episode, which it isn't. But I know your whole point is to always do, a burn on the episode, even if the episode's good. But yeah. I mean, so she's not experiencing another life of a dead person, I suppose. I mean, I guess she does die at the end of the episode, but when she's experiencing most of these memories, the person is still alive. That's how they're able to transmit these memories, but, close enough, I guess. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, "This episode definitely has TNG Troi-centric episode vibes. It feels like Violations or Man of the People, but definitely better. This is another episode that I used to discount, but have appreciated more and more because of your channel." Well, I'm glad I can help. I do like that when I hear people saying, I never thought much about this episode until I watched your channel. Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm able to make people appreciate the show more. It's better than getting them to hate episodes, I suppose. I actually disagree. I would have never known this was a Troi episode unless I read that online. As I said, the beginning felt like a TNG setup, but the actual episode itself did not feel like a Troi episode, but that's just my humble opinion. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, when I said earlier that season 3 starts with the weak string of episodes, I totally forgot about this one. It's a great episode because it makes very important social commentary about the importance to remember past crimes and sins, especially in a time when there are groups who want to trivialize the Holocaust or slavery, or groups who think it is unimportant to teach history since it is not useful in most jobs. I was able to meet and listen to survivor of the Holocaust, but sadly, there is no longer possible for the next generation. In Japan, they have a great project where survivors of the atomic bomb share their memories with the younger person who preserves and tells these individuals' memories. This episode reminded me strongly of this project. Do you think it was okay that Chakotay entered Taurus's quarters after she was only 20 minutes late, even if it was for the second time? Surely he could have checked prior if her life signs were normal. If they were normal, I think this was not appropriate, and any normal person would have the shock of their life if a colleague suddenly appeared in their bedroom. Did he do the same thing when Paris was constantly late in season 2? So my rating is 10, the best. So I think with your analogy with Chakotay, what's missing is that Chakotay and Taurus are good friends. And I think, as I said, this is something they established, like they've been in a Maquis together, and occasionally, like, they're really close. So I think that's what makes it a bit more forgivable, and why Taurus wasn't so pissed off that Chakotay was in her quarters, because I feel like he's been there before, again, in a non-sexual, platonic way, because I think they are close friends, and that having him show up there wasn't really an invasion of her privacy. That if anyone else, like if it was Janeway or Tuvok in her quarters, then that would have been more like of a shock to her, more of an invasion of privacy. And so no, I don't think Chakotay did the same thing to Tom Paris, because they are not only are they not friends, they were very antagonistic towards each other at the time. So I don't think Chakotay would have risked breaking into Tom Paris's quarters and inciting an incident over it. But I think it's a bit more appropriate here. But that is just my humble interpretation of it. Now, as far as your analogy with Holocaust survivors and survivors of the atomic bombs in Japan, I do think that's appropriate for this episode, but I actually think it fits even better with the episode Memorial in season 6. That is the episode that's all about remembering atrocities. Where this one is, it's not so much about remembering atrocities, it's about correcting the lies and the propaganda that is commonly believed that make people believe there weren't any atrocities to begin with. So it's slightly different. But yeah, I think this would apply more to Memorial, which, to be fair, Memorial's actually kind of a similar episode in terms of the commentary they're making. But again, the difference here, I think, is that this one is about people who believe the atrocities never committed and trying to make them aware. So it's not so much remembering the atrocities, it's making them aware that these atrocities existed in the first place. Maybe a little bit different. I don't know. Alright, so next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who's making me sing from a band I've never heard of called the Shangri-Las. Yeah, anyway. Remember walking in the sand. Remember walking hand in hand. Remember, no, I didn't get any disease. Remember, but I still betrayed him. Remember, decide the definite genocide we done. Anyway, alright. Okay, that sucked, but that was the best I currently could come up with. I mean, it's about a freaking Holocaust. I think this episode may have been fine in TNG, and I could have seen Marina Sirtis act the hell out of it, hopefully. Hoping if it would be closer to Face of the Enemy or Nepenthe, so I know she could be really good. But Dawson really knocks it out of the park. And the rewrites of the script to explain how telepaths can influence another via Janeway and the instrument was enough to have us buy that Torres could get these dreams, where it would have been easily buyable with Troi, just like in Night Terrors. But this is definitely one of the best Torres episodes, and this is a solid episode, and otherwise mostly what is going on with Voyager early this third season. 9 sexy dreams, but with disturbing history that must be known out of 10. Yes, thank you for making me sing again. Yeah, I totally agree. Couldn't agree more with this being a really great B'Elanna episode, a really great Roxanne Dawson performance. And I think it does work better than it would with Troi. I didn't think about how Troi, since she's empathic, they could explain that's why she was experiencing this, but in this episode they made it clear that anyone could get these telepathic memories from the telepathic alien. So yeah, I think that's fine. I didn't even notice it, but you're right, they did do a good job explaining it. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Remember out of 10 is going to be a 10, the best. Probably not too surprised to hear me say that. I said this is one of my favorite Voyager episodes, and it is. I think this is didn't quite make my top 20 Star Trek franchise episodes of the entire franchise, but I do think it's up there. I do think it would probably make my top 50. I think it is a very classic, powerful Star Trek episode that really gets into the commentary of not just genocide, but propaganda. And I think as much as it is a good analogy to the Holocaust, I think it goes beyond just that. I think it's just a powerful... it's a powerful character story. It has great acting in it, and it's one of those episodes that really hits me emotionally and makes me think. And again, I think that's what Star Trek does best. Powerful, emotional character stories that also have strong, hard-hitting commentary that's very relevant to not only modern day but to history. So yes, I think it is easily one of the best episodes of the entire show. Now, you might have heard me talk about season 3 and how I don't like season 3 of Voyager, and I call this one of the exceptions, particularly when it comes to early season 3, because in the last little bit of the season they did sort of improve, but in the early part of season 3, or at least not even the early part, the first half or the first 2/3 in fact, it was mostly not good. It was mostly bad episode after bad episode. And I talked about how in another video I talked about how Jerry Taylor was and the writing staff was probably trying to find their way after the departure of Michael Piller. And I kind of guess that's why they went back to a TNG idea, is because that they couldn't really come up with anything, or maybe they were rushed. But I have no specific evidence or anything telling me that they were rushed. But it feels like if they went back to a TNG idea, that they were having a hard time coming up with ideas. And as I said, most of the other episodes in this first 2/3 of the season don't work, and they weren't able to come up with ideas. But I think the reason why this is an exception is because this idea already existed from TNG. But then again, Lisa Klink, I think, does do a really amazing job of adapting it to Voyager, and I think that look, I don't like everything that she does, because she She said her favorite episode that she worked on was Blood Fever, which I'll get to, and that's not a good episode. She also liked Innocence and Sacred Ground, which I'll cover shortly, which I also think are not good episodes. So that's maybe just my personal taste. So I don't always think that she's the best writer, but I think when she really hits it, she really does an amazing job. And I think this is probably her best script ever, in my humble opinion. Anyway, that is it for my review of. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the episode, and subscribe. And if you really want to support the channel, you could do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description below. I have different rewards for different tiers, such as you can make comments that I'll read in my videos like I just did, or I have pre-releases, you can request a video for me to do, or I have a series of videos that I release exclusively for my Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I've already made. So, let's see what's coming up next on the channel. So, Monday will be my review for the DS9 episode Looking for Parmach in all the wrong places. Wednesday, I will be doing a Patreon requested video with the top 10 Deep Space Nine characters. Thursday, I will be covering the Deep Space Nine episode Nor the Battle to the Strong, and then Saturday, covering yet another Deep Space Nine episode, The Assignment. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check me out as I continue to cover Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.